The Democrats say this is not a violation of due process, not a violation of our constitutional rights. It most certainly is. Remember the basics here. Someone doesn't like you. They file a complaint. There is a hearing within 24 hours, a hearing that you're not allowed to attend. You're not allowed to be there to face your accusers. The government takes your gun or guns. Several days later, there's a real hearing. Well, a real hearing with a lower standard. The burden of proof for the government is not beyond a reasonable doubt to deny you your constitutional right. It's a clear and convincing standard. So a lower standard to take away your fundamental liberty when you didn't commit any crime. If that's not a violation of due process, I do not know what is. And all this will be, the Title I of this bill, it'll all be administered by the Biden administration Department of Justice. The same Department of Justice that got a letter from a left-wing political organization and 5 days later sent a memorandum to every single U.S. attorney in this country saying this: set up a dedicated line of threat communication on parents, use counterterrorism measures against moms and dads who had the nerve to show up at a school board meeting and speak up for their kid. And then 16 days after that memorandum went out, the FBI sends an email out and says, put a threat tag, a designation, a label on moms and dads who did show up at school board meetings, who someone filed a complaint about on that snitch line, and investigate them. That same Biden administration Justice Department will be administering this law. That is why we are so against this measure and why it is so darn dangerous. They can say all day long it doesn't violate due process. It most certainly does, and it's going to be administered by a Justice Department that's already proven they're willing to go after parents who speak up for their kids. That's why this bill is so terrible. And why Republican senators are pushing this and trying, as Mr. Gates from Florida said, trying to bribe states to implement this when we have the history of the Biden Justice Department and we know what this thing is going to look like and how it's going to violate due process. That's what's wrong with this legislation and why Republicans, why we're so darn against this thing. I hope they will come to their senses and stand up for the law-abiding American citizens and their fundamental liberties and vote this thing down. Madam Speaker, we reserve. 29, 2021, vaccinated people do not carry the virus. Vaccinated people don't get sick. We got that information from clinical trials, but also real-world data. It seems to me there are a number of statements you make in there that aren't accurate. Do vaccinated people carry the virus?
In March of 2021, the vast majority of data demonstrated that the vast majority of people were not getting infected if they were vaccinated.
That's not what you said. You didn't say the vast majority of people. You said vaccinated people do not carry the virus. Was that accurate?
It was generally accurate.
Generally accurate. Why not just be accurate? Why not just tell the American people the truth? Why don't you say to the American people just what you said to me? We're big boys and girls. We pay your salary. The government is supposed to be of the people, by the people, for the people. Why not just tell us the truth?
I was speaking...
Was 6 weeks later when you said if you were to get infected during post-vaccination, you can't give it to anyone else. Was that accurate?
What was the date of that?
May 19, 2021.
At the time, we had the Wuhan strain and then the Alpha strain. That was the Alpha strain that was circulating. That was generally true, yeah.
Generally true again? Why not again? Why not tell the American people this is generally true?
I couldn't tell you the exact data on the vaccine effectiveness of symptomatic disease and severe disease at the time. What I can tell you is that we generally saw that if you were to get infected after you had been vaccinated, that you were not carrying the virus by transmitting it to somebody else. You could not transmit it to others.
But we know that's not accurate.
It was at the time. Now, what happened? Yes, in May of 2021. That was true for the Alpha variant. What happened?
Let me ask you about all the general statements that were made to the American people. Not general statements, the way you guys said it. You said, was it our tax dollars? Were our tax dollars used in the lab in China?
That is something that you would have to speak to NIH about.
Our tax dollars were used. It sure looks like it was gain-of-function research. It sure looks like it actually came from the lab, and we've had several agencies, federal agencies, say that's in fact where the virus originated. The Biden administration told us that the vaccinated couldn't get it. We know that's not accurate. The Biden administration told us the vaccinated couldn't transmit it. They told us masks worked, and they told us there was no such thing as natural immunity. That seems to me to be, 7 different statements that turned out not to be true that we got from this administration. Again, why not just tell the American people the truth?
So I would dispute some of what you just said. In October 2021, CDC released a scientific brief highlighting all of the science that was out there on infection-induced immunity. And I don't know the long list I don't remember all the long list, but there are numerous areas where we have provided science and the science review to provide data to the American people as soon as we had it.
I actually think what happened is you actually tried to be honest with the American people, and the Biden administration shot you down. You remember when you said this in February? This is before you made these statements, which I think are not being square with the American people. You said vaccination of teachers is not a prerequisite for safely reopening schools. Did you make that statement?
Something to that effect. I can't exactly say the quote, but yeah.
Vaccinations of teachers is not a prerequisite for safely reopening schools. I think you made that statement on February 3rd. Do you stand by that statement?
At the time, yeah. We had a week later or 10 days later, we had an operational guidance that demonstrated layered mitigation strategies and that you could safely reopen.
Were you speaking as Dr. Walensky, or were you speaking as Dr. Walensky, head of the CDC?
I have said that while I've been in front of Congress and the media and press conferences, during my tenure as CDC director, I've been speaking as the CDC director.
But that's not what the White House said, right? Jen Psaki said Dr. Walensky spoke to this in her personal capacity. Do you remember that statement?
I do.
Who's right? Jen Psaki or you?
Well, I will tell you that I was speaking in my role as the CDC director.
Looks to me like what happened is in February you said, I'm going to be honest with the American people. I'm going to give it to them straight. Vaccination of teachers is not a prerequisite for safely opening schools, and the Biden administration hung you out to dry. They said, nope, she ain't talking for us. She ain't talking as the head of the CDC. She's talking as Dr. Walensky. And then a month later, you said, well, you know what? I better not be totally honest with the American people. So I'm going to say vaccinated people do not carry the virus and they don't get sick. And everyone understands, like, wow, I know someone who's been vaccinated and they've gotten sick afterwards. I think what happened is you tried to be honest and they said no. And then you said, well, I'm going to have to hedge a little bit. I'm going to have to give the American people misleading statements from the head of the CDC. You were speaking as head of the CDC in both situations, right?
I have said I've been speaking as the head of the CDC.
All the time? Yeah. Well, it'd have been nice if you'd have just been honest and straightforward with the American people every single time throughout this virus. With that,
I had never heard of the Great Replacement Theory until USA Today wrote a story on it. And it's amazing that a congresswoman can impugn somebody's character without even allowing them to answer.
Well, for those of you that don't know, I am an American, and I'm also a proud daughter of a woman who crossed the Southwest border 40 years ago. And I have to tell you that I've been sitting here with a little scorecard of the number of things that I've heard that almost directly say that my mother and asylum seekers are less than human. I've heard a Republican member, talk about immigrants as an infestation, and another one call it an invasion. Mr. Arthur, you and your organization have frequently proposed and defended extreme anti-immigrant policies, such as the Trump administration's so-called zero-tolerance policy, which resulted in thousands of children being taken from their parents at the border, hundreds of whom still have not been reunited. In fact, you called this cruel and inhumane policy, and I quote, absolutely crucial. You also referred to provisions in law meant to protect migrant children as, and I quote, loopholes and quote, flaws, and argued for their elimination. Maybe this kind of awful rhetoric is to be expected from a witness representing an organization founded by an anti-immigrant, racist, white nationalist like John Tanton, but it should have no place before this committee. And then we have Mr. Judd, who has used media appearances to repeat the Great Replacement Theory, tropes regularly pushed by hate groups. This kind of dangerous rhetoric has inspired a rising number of domestic terror incidents across the country in recent years. And all of this for a hearing about a non-existent crisis along a shared border with our friend, our ally, and partner, Canada.
I'd like to yield 1 minute to Mr. Arthur to respond to some of the attacks that were directed his way, if that'd be appropriate.
Thank you, Mr. Strong, and I do appreciate that. One, I disagree with almost everything that the honorable woman said. The Center for Immigration Studies was founded by Otis Graham, who was a professor at the University of California, San Diego. On our board of directors, we have the first Hispanic U.S. attorney from San Diego. We have the former executive director for the Congressional Black Caucus, who was also the former graduate dean at Morgan State University in the home state of Mr. Ivey and I. And we also have the president of the Urban League of Miami. With respect to families and family units and the separation policy, it was poorly handled. But in an April 2019 report, a bipartisan panel of the Homeland Security Advisory Committee found that those children are being used as pawns and that they're all traumatized on the trip to the United States. With respect to unaccompanied alien children, I believe the Washington Post editorial board may have used the word loophole to refer to the TVPRA as well. I can't remember if they did, but they certainly alluded to it. But in June of 2014 in Guatemala, President Biden talked about how those kids are being placed in the hands of criminals to be smuggled to the United States who physically and sexually assault them. If you took all of the children who have been released into the United States under the Biden administration, put them all in one school district, it would be the 6th largest in the United States. If you had a school district in which there were a significant number of physical and sexual assaults going on every day, that would be the only thing, God, I pray, that this committee and every committee on Capitol Hill would be looking at every day.
Mr. Judd, how many years have you been an agent?
25, but I'd first like to start. I'm amazed that a member of Congress can actually impugn somebody's character without letting that individual answer the question. She said that I repeated white nationalist tropes, when in reality, all I did was repeated what John D. Podesta said. John D. Podesta's think tank said, demographics, I believe that this is a direct quote, demographics is destiny. I had never heard of the Great Replacement Theory until USA Today wrote a story on it. And it's amazing that a congresswoman can impugn somebody's character without even allowing them to answer. I've been a Border Patrol agent for 25 years.
Well, I'm glad you got to address that. And if you'd like to say anything else on my time, go for it. What else you got?
Sorry about that.
Now, how long have you been representing Border Patrol agents in the National Border Patrol Council?
I've been in a position, one or the other, for about 15 years, approximately.
Thank you, sir. Would you say you're proud of your job? And if so, why?
Very, very proud of my job. I think that it's very important for the safety and security of the American people.
I think you told me a couple years ago, sir, the first time I ever met you, that your organization has endorsed candidates from both parties. Is that correct?
We have.
So would you say that your organization is bipartisan?
It absolutely is.
That's weird because that doesn't happen a lot up in this town. Can you elaborate on why your organization's is bipartisan?
We'll work with anybody that wants to secure the border. That's what we want. We work for the safety and security of the American people. Any law enforcement, when they put on a uniform, what they want to do is they want to protect citizens, and that's what we want to do, and we'll work with anybody that will work with us.
Thank you, sir. Would you agree with Secretary Mayorkas' assessment that we have operational control at the southern border?
Absolutely not.
Can you briefly describe some of the most detrimental policy changes that current administration has put into place?
When you look at the main magnet that draws people to cross our borders illegally is whether or not they're going to be released into the United States. Right now, nearly everybody that crosses the border illegally, if they're not expelled under Title 42, which is only about 30% right now, then they're released into the United States. That's the main magnet that drives people, and he has put that, if you will, he's put that on steroids.
Yeah. Does it bother you on a personal level to see these changes made?
It does, because I know that we can't properly protect the American people with these policies.
Yeah, one of the things that was covered earlier, sir, was the attrition rate in the Border Patrol. In your professional and long-standing position in the Border Patrol, do you think that has anything to do with Border Patrol agents feeling like it doesn't even matter what they do?
It does. I speak with agents on a regular basis that are leaving the agency because they know that they can't do the job that they wanted to do.
That's got to be kind of heartbreaking to somebody who's devoted so much of your time and life, sacrificed time away from your family to protecting American citizens.
It is.
Yeah. Sir, do you know when President Biden's first visit to the border was? Was it January 23rd?
It was, yes.
Yep. So how many years into his presidency was that, sir?
Just over 2 years.
Do you know how many trips President Trump made to the border, Mr. Judd?
I don't know exactly, but I know that he made multiple trips.
Yeah, we were looking it up this morning. I think it was about 5. Do you think it has, as a leader yourself, do you think it has anything to do with leadership if you actually show up to the places that you represent and the people that follow you see you show up?
Yeah, any time that you know that somebody supports what you're doing, what your mission is, you're going to be a lot more energized to do the job.
Awesome. Mr. Arthur, my last question is for you. My colleague over here from Michigan, Mr. Thanader, showed a video of some vehicles going over a bridge in Michigan and then stated that this is hardly a picture of disorder. And I asked a couple other members if they got the same implication that I did, that, hey, it doesn't really, because of the video I'm showing where cars are going over a border and trucks are going over a border, there's no issue here. When you saw that, what did you think about, that example that he made in the video that he showed? Do you think that described the border issues that we have going on here in the United States, sir?
Well, actually, the interesting thing is that the conclusion that I drew from that talks about why this hearing today was so important. We need to listen to Dr. Dawson, the ranking member, talked about the importance of trade between the United States and Canada. We need to continue that relationship. Our relationship with Canada is absolutely crucial to our vitality, our economic vitality. I know that the time is up. I'll make it short. We need to make sure that continues. I was in, not this building, but 2 buildings down on September 11th. And everything changed that way, certainly changed. I was oversight counsel for immigration. The dangers that we would have to shut down our economy, shut down our borders, shut down our commerce because something had happened were real.
Sir, I was asking about a specific video.
I understand that. But
I'm going to real quick. I'm going to go to Mr. Judd. Mr. Judd, when you watch that video,
Point of order.
Como organiza suas pausas durante o dia? Suas vendas são feitas através de qual plataforma digital? O que você faz com o resto dos fios? Você tem estoque? Ufa, quantas perguntas! Obrigada por ser tão atenciosa e motivar as crocheteiras. Obrigada, Paula. Quantas perguntas, né? Vamos por etapa também. Eu adoro essas perguntas, gente. Vamos lá. A minha rotina, como eu expliquei para vocês. Gente, falando nisso, as perguntas são repetidas, mas eu quero trazer o máximo para vocês de resposta. Por quê? Às vezes a gente não consegue falar tudo, né? Com uma perguntinha só. Então, a rotina que eu falei, né? Eu levanto às 5:30, às vezes, quando eu tô cansada, gente, eu quiser dormir até às 10, eu durmo até às 10, porque nós não somos de aço, tá? Mas a maioria dos meus dias são essas sim. Levanta às 5:30, tudo, organiza a casa. E tem uma coisa que eu faço que é super legal, que eu quero passar de dica para vocês. Inclusive, se eu puder, a próxima vez que eu for fazer, eu vou tentar gravar para vocês o que eu faço. Durante a semana, como sou só eu aqui em casa, eu e o Vinícius, porque o Anthony, né, já não tá morando mais aqui, adaptamos, né, as marmitinhas congeladas. Então, assim, geralmente no domingo, quando a gente faz aquele montão de comida, que é o dia que eu quero cozinhar e comer